So again, I'm repeating a lot of what Dr. Mordechai Kedar, who's a professor at Bar-Ilan University, and he was head of military intelligence for dealing with the Arab world.
Okay.
He has a huge amount of knowledge of the Arab understanding, the Arab mentality and mindset. He speaks Arabic fluently, and there are different dialects, and he speaks a lot of the dialects fluently. So he's one of the few gems in Israel that knows how to get a message across and understands what the Arabs are saying and what they're feeling and how to deal with it.
Is he being heard though?
And he is being heard. He's on Al Jazeera
Okay.
TV quite regularly, and his articles that he writes, and he writes regularly, are being translated into Arabic, because as he put it, there is a thirst for factual knowledge in the Arab world. They know they're being fed a lot of lines on a lot of their news stations, and with Moti Kedar they know they're getting the truth. And they want to read it, they want to understand, they need to understand. We don't understand the Israeli mentality. From their perspective, they're being fed political interest lines from their side, but they don't actually know what's going on, why. It doesn't make sense that human mentality would just bomb or want to kill children or bloodthirsty. So they are tapping in, and he's one of the channels they're tapping into.
I'll stop you on the 8-state
Yes.
solution and all these solutions. Actually, going back to something you just said,
Yes.
I actually have a quote from a Lebanese lady.
Okay.
And she's actually saying that the whole world, her story is that she lived a lot of her life in bomb shelters and in a small village, and this war was all around them, and the Jews were evil, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And something happened, there was a bomb, and she ended up in an Israeli hospital. And she saw that the Israeli hospital was actually looking after everybody with the same level of care and attention. So a quote from her, which is something that you've just led me to, which was, the whole world is suffering from a plague of terrorism, which is not caused by desperation, occupation, but the mere thought of a Jewish state. And that's from, so really, like you say, Dr. Kader, his words, the words of, truth is slowly coming out, but will we sit in our day, in our kids' days? Let's hope, but who knows? But going back to this solutions, the multi-solutions, explain that.
So how the Arab world essentially is divided up, the culture and their languages are all very, very different, and even the religions are very different. There is an assumption that everybody's either Arab or Muslim, and it doesn't quite work like that. If you take Syria or Iraq as an example, there are tens of different clans and families, and they head up these clans, and they each have a slight variation of the religion. So, for example, Bashar Assad is not a Muslim. He is an Alawite, and his clan is an Alawite, and that means that's his family name, and they practice a different type of religion, which I don't fully know.
It's very tribal.
Very tribal. So what happens is the strongest tribe rules. That's how it is.
That's what
in
happens
Libya.
in my house. I roll.
So in Libya, Gaddafi, his tribe ruled, and you always have a minority ruling over a huge majority. And what normally happens is they split into Sunni and Shiite, different sects of the Muslim religion, but Bashar Assad is an Alawite, and he's seen as the worst of the worst. But because they rule by power, they have to rule by force. So for him to relinquish power is not just to simply step down, it's to be slaughtered. They're not fighting for the throne, they're fighting for their lives and their families' lives. And that's how it works in the Middle East.
It's like fighting for your name. It's like fighting to maintain that power.
More than
actually,
that.
it's not even a tangible necessarily. It's not even a tangible product. It's just.
Well, it's power certainly rules there, and they would be slaughtered. Their throats would be slit, their entire family, and that's the problem. So it's either I kill you or you kill me. That's how it works in the Arab world, and you can see that with the bloodshed in Syria and in Iraq. And then you get the larger powers like Iran, who feel that they want to rule regionally. So there's many different factions, many different clans. So the reason why Dr. Moti Kedar, first of all, we have the two-state solution, which is essentially Israel in its state in defined and secure borders, and the Palestinians in their state defined and secure borders, which is a problem in its own right, because Jordan is essentially a Palestinian state, and the West Bank is essentially a continuation of Jordan. And the Gaza it's a problem because Gazans are entirely different clan, different families. They are essentially Bedouins. They're not from the Palestinians, from the Palestinian side, from the Jordanians, who are also ruled by a single small minority of Hashemites. Again, so the Gazan Palestinian is more closely related to the Egyptian side, which is why the Muslim Brotherhood, who control Gaza, who control Egypt, are very closely related to Hamas at the moment now. So that's why the two-state solution is a problem, because the West Bank Palestinians cannot get on with the Gazan Palestinians. And when they don't get on, well, this is it. When I say you don't get on, they want to kill each other, and they do. That's how elections happen. So then you start talking about, well, let's do a three-state solution. But once you start looking at a three-state solution, Dr. Moti Kedal said, hold on, we're going to have a problem, because within the West Bank, there's a whole different bunch of clans and families there. And he wants to separate them. He's saying you need one in Ramallah, you need one in Kalkilia, you need another one up in the north. And he wants to separate to different clans where they each have their own family head of clans and they rule themselves.
They totally rule themselves.
But they rule themselves, and they have a type of a federation of clans forming under maybe a single flag. That's all. Very loose confederation, a United States of the West Bank.
Gulf Emirates.
That kind of thing, a Gulf Emirates. And so that's, I think his solution is, let's not make them struggle. Who's going to be the one leader, the one clan to rule? Let's each give them their own portion. But then they all have a problem with Israel, and they all have a problem with certainly the fundamentalists, who certainly want to take over the whole of Israel and don't want Israel to exist at all.
Yes.
Behind that you have the superpowers, which have their own interests, and Israel certainly has America behind it with its interests. But you have Hamas, who are backed financially by Iran. So for Iran to just step aside would essentially crumble Hamas. They would lose power and authority to other religious and fundamentalist organizations, Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda, who are now popping up in Gaza. So there's a huge amount of interest. It's not just saying, let's sit down at the table and split things up. You've got different interests, different clans, different heads, and you've got a multitude of parties. And if one of the parties don't come to the table, there won't be a peace agreement.
This actually sounds like Friday night in my house. But seriously, the reality is, I knew nothing of that. I knew all those names that you were saying.
Yes.
I had heard a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But really, you've cleared up a lot for me. But you've also made it a little bit more scary for me, because it seems to me that there is actually no way of coming up with any solution. So Prager University, it's 5 minutes. It's an online organisation that gives you 5 minutes of education, and they're saying the actual issue is tiny. It's how you deal with it, and how it's going to be solved is huge. And you've just explained that in a nutshell. So your job as chairperson, I mean, you've got a battle ahead.
Yeah. It's a huge battle. It's an endless battle. You have essentially the propaganda PR of the fundamentalists, not all the Muslims, it's not the entire Arab nation, but there's certainly a large faction of them who believe the education that they fed. And if you have a look in the West Bank, which is slightly more moderate than Hamas and the other factions, they are teaching their children that they need to aspire to be suicide bombers. That death is a good thing. When you see on a local TV station equivalent of a Sesame Street, where a child sings a song on how she wants to die and take out Jewish lives with her to be seen as a hero or a heroine, then for us, it's the next generation that's being poisoned. And for us, we see it as not only do they not want peace, but they want to teach their children not to accept peace with Israel.
So your job as, or the role of the Zionist Federation started 1899 or something, like over 100 years ago.
The Zionist Federation.
And the role that you have to play is not actually, it still seems that you're setting down the seeds. You're not even.
Yeah.
I mean, if what you're saying is that the next generation of all these different communities are being taught to hate the Jewish people, the Jewish state, the ideals of the Jews, then actually you're just still watering the plants, really. You're watering the seeds. And this is an ongoing...
We need to fight. We need to fight back. We can't sit back and just hope for it to happen. We don't see an immediate solution. But winning doesn't necessarily mean not making a difference.
Yeah.
We might not win every war,
Yeah.
but we'll certainly make a difference in everything. And every piece of information that we get out there and we change minds, hearts and minds, will relate back to politicians who put less pressure on Israeli politicians, who allow the soldiers more time in the front line to defend Israeli lives. So we're seeing ourselves as being on the front line of defending Israeli family life.